Welcome back to another episode of the All Tens Podcast. I'm your co-host, Josh West, here with Clay Harris. And today we're talking about the journey that we take with all of our clients and all of the tools and disciplines that we introduce. Also, a byproduct of that is that we enhance and develop 5 leadership abilities that are constantly required in order to take organizations to the next level. And today we're going to take a deep dive into simplify and the ability for leaders to simplify within the organization. Clay, do you have some relevant experience shares with clients for our listeners?
Right, Josh. So we start with simplify, and we start with simplify because it kind of lays the foundation for us to teach everything else. If you can't keep it simple, it's really hard to do everything else. And when we talk about simplify in the room, we kind of lay out the opposite. We lay out the complexity model, right? As organizations grow and you add more people, the communication paths that have to happen between that growing company grow at a faster rate than the rate that the people grow, right? Because every person that you adds at least 2 more modes of communication, but then that's logarithmic, right? As you add more people, the communication paths grow exponentially. So it's incumbent upon leadership teams to keep messages as simple as possible. The most rudimentary example of this is the game of telephone, right? Like if you're sitting around a table with a group of people and you say something really complex and let it pass around the table, whispered from ear to ear, when it comes back to you, it probably isn't the same as when it left your mouth. If you say one word, it's more likely to be the same when it gets back around. So we focus really hard on keeping things simple. And there's no trick to it. It's just hard work, right? And so I'm thinking of a client that I've been working with recently who is a verbose visionary. Um, as most entrepreneurial leaders are, full of ideas, and one idea begets 37 other ideas that all have a bunch of color and angles and like, oh, and what about this? And then, right? And when you're sitting in the room listening, it's a beautiful picture, but when you leave the room, you can't repeat any of it. And so, in my experience, what we're really working to do is kind of expand the impact of the leadership team by making the rest of the organization kind of amplify their message. And so we work really hard to make it as simple as possible so that when the rest of the team has to go out and spread the good word, they can do it as simply as possible, and you have to make it really small and short in the room. This is just a communication example of keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%, because so far we're just talking about just communication. And as your organization grows, not only, as you mentioned, the lines of communication growing exponentially, but also all of the other processes and procedures within the organization are becoming more complicated. When you have one customer with one need, that's fairly simple, but go get 10 customers and they have all different kind of idiosyncratic needs to them. You've got to remember that other detail about that account, et cetera. And so inevitably, as the organization grows, complexity is growing up all around you from all angles, from the communication angle, as you've mentioned in that example, and also everything else that's happening in the organization. So if you want to succeed, great. Complexity is coming to your doorstep.
So, Josh, I tend to harp on the community. Here I am talking a lot. I recognize the irony. I tend to harp on the communication part of it because so much of what we do as leaders is tell people things and then have them go do things, right? And so how you talk in the room is typically going to be representative of how you talk with your team, is going to be representative of how they talk with their teams, and the cascading effects of simple communication can be really impactful. And I think that if you can get good at the communicating your ideas simply, then that kind of flows into all the other things that you're talking about. Is that your experience too?
I completely agree. And that's internal and external. So internally, as the example that you gave, the visionaries painted this great picture, but then when we walk out of the room, that can't be easily recreated. So you can't reasonably expect, even if someone's in the room, if they can't recreate that, then what happens 2 to 3 levels removed once we've left the room there? Also, your marketing messaging and how you're talking to the market. Simplest is best. That clear communication out to the market. There's that old saying, if you're explaining, you're losing. And so, lots of
Hmm.
people would look at the marketing department and think, oh, okay, well, that's fonts and colors, right? Like, should be pretty easy to get the message out. And in reality, you've got about half a second and 3 words to get your message out to your target audience and who you're trying to communicate with. And so that simplicity is absolutely demanded, both internally and externally.
Super smart. Any nuggets when you're like talking about simplicity with your clients? Any nuggets that you rely on? Anything that you kind of like to leave in their head so that they can approach simplicity more simply outside of the room?
Yeah, and this applies across the board. Another way of saying it is just simply less is more. How about you, Clay? What do you drop on it?
That's perfect. Good job. Um, you hear these things and I don't like them. I don't like dumb it down. I don't like keep it simple, stupid. Those are things that I feel like people often like infer from this conversation around simplicity. But there's a real art and a real high level of complexity that has to go into making it simple. Like figuring out how to say something that's really complex and full of intricacies and nuance, but saying it in a simple way takes a real skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say keep it simple, stupid, or dumb it down, or whatever, I think it kind of undermines what we're trying to do because we want to capture nuance and intricacy and all that kind of stuff in the simplest way possible. And so I ask my clients to really thread that needle of like, make it memorable, make it effective, make it simple, and also don't lose the stuff that makes you special. Right. And so that's my little nugget that
I'm with you. And I think it's time for the All Tens podcast to put a call out, and let's put dumb it down and keep it simple, stupid to bed forever,
oh wow,
forevermore.
you heard it here first. From from this podcast to the rest of the Western Hemisphere, let's see if we can make it happen, people. We'll just start there.
We're done with those phrases. Remove them from your vocabulary.
Wow. Call the New York Times.
Take them home, Clay.
Well, I want to thank everybody for listening to another episode of the All Tens podcast. We're doing 5 leadership abilities. So if you listen to this one, there's going to be 4 more because 4 plus 1 equals 5. That's the only math we'll ever have in the podcast, except for we ask you to rate the meeting, and that does use numbers, and we want you to rate it a 10 because we want to run a level 10 podcast every time. If it's not a 10, let us know why, or even if you love us, tell us that too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Josh.
Bye, Clay.
Bye.